Hey there, welcome to another episode of Legends with Elroy. Now, I'm excited to tell you another story about Billy Bob that night. Now, this one starts in the bathtub. A splish splash, I was taking a bath. All about a Saturday night. A rubba-dubba, just relaxing in the tub. Thinking, what's that? I guess someone's at the door. So Billy Bob made his way over to the door. And he opened it, and there before him was Stanley and his friend Porky. Now Porky was a porcupine, not a pig. Some people get confused on that. But I digress. And Stanley and Porky were both wearing funny little hats. They kind of looked like explorer hats. Billy Bob said, "Well, what are you guys doing?" And they said, "Billy Bob, we wanted you to come with us because we are explorers and we're looking for the lost city." And Billy Bob said, "Lost city? Well, where is that? And why?" They said, "Well, Billy Bob, no one knows where the lost city is. That's why it's lost." Silly. But you see, we're looking for it because there's rumored to be gold all throughout it and treasures beyond anything you can imagine. And Billy Bob said, "But you guys don't actually use money and stuff. So why do you need the gold?" They said, "That's a good point. Well, we just figured we'd, get it and then we could take baths in it and stuff, and I don't really know. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but we're looking for it." And Billy Bob said, "Okay, well, I guess I could help you. What's this city called?" And they said, "It doesn't have a name, at least not that anybody can remember. All the people remember is that it was made of gold, and that now it is sunken into the sands of the desert." Billy Bob said, "Well, that sounds pretty cool. Let me go get my clothes and we'll get going." Billy Bob, of course, was still wearing a bath towel. But he went and he got his clothes, which he usually would take armor on things, but when he heard they were going to the desert, he figured that would be crazy, because it would be really hot walking around in all that metal. So him and Porky, who is a porcupine, him and Porky and Stanley set off on their way. Well, he and them, that's the proper, anyways. So they set off on their way. And after several days of walking, they arrived in the desert. Now, the desert is quite grand, especially if you've never seen it before. You see, it's like an ocean, but all before you, just sand, going in hills up and down as far as the eye can see. And Billy Bob, who now had an explorer hat as well, said, "Well, how are we gonna find this place?" And Stanley said, "Well, I have a map, and it says that we have to take 20,000 steps northward and then 25,000 steps southward, and then we have to do it all over again." And Billy Bob said, "That doesn't make any sense, because you'd just be going back and forth." Stanley said, "I was afraid something was off with the map. Well, I guess we can just focus on the legend. See, the legend is that this city used to be in a great island, and all around us was an ocean, and that it sank into the ocean. But the thing is, it should still be on a great hill that is far, far above the rest of the desert." Billy Bob said, "I don't know how that helps us, because that doesn't really tell us what direction, but I guess if we go northward, maybe we can find it there." And Stanley said, "Yes, that makes sense, because they said that it was to the north." Billy Bob said, did they? He said, I don't know. But anyways, they set off on their way looking for a great mound of sand. Now, the desert is very hot for those of you who don't know. And the odd thing, though, is it's hot during the day and cold at night. You have crazy temperature swings. And so they took a little bit of water, but soon they were running very low on water. And then they started having these things called mirages. And Billy Bob was looking around. He's like, oh, I think I see the mound. But then suddenly he would see Porky, and Porky was doing like a little dance, and he had his hat on, and he was juggling stuff, and then suddenly he was hiding, and Billy Bob was like, that's a lot like Porky, but Porky's right next to me, so I guess that's not real. So they kept on walking, until at last they did come to a great mound. It was like a huge mountain. And Billy Bob said, Stanley, look at that. I don't think we can climb that with how little water we have. We're going to have to come back a different day. But see, the desert all kind of looks the same. Which way do we go? And Stanley said, I don't know. But just then, they heard a curious noise. It was almost like a clicking sound. Like that. And Billy Bob looked over, and there before him was a great beast. But it was kind of silly looking at the same time. Very tall, with thin legs and a very wide top. And Billy Bob looked over, and he said, who goes there? And it was a camel. And the camel said, my name is Calvin the Camel. What are you guys doing here? I don't think I've ever seen one of you. Billy Bob said, skunks. He said, skunks. Or whatever that pointy thing is, a porcupine. Well, what are you all doing here? And Billy Bob said, well, we were looking for the city of gold, and I think we might have found it, but, well, we ran out of water, and we need to get home, and we don't know which way to go. And Calvin said, oh, no problem. I've been following you this whole time. And Billy Bob said, really? Well, but aren't you thirsty? And the camel said, no. You see, we camels, we have this big hump on our back, you see? Well, we can fill it with water. And we can go without water for quite a long time because we've got so much storage back there. But we don't share the water. And Billy Bob looked over at Porky, and Porky was, well, he thought he was eating an ice cream cone, so he was like, and Billy Bob was like, oh no. And then he looked over at Stanley, and Stanley thought he was making cupcakes, and he was like, I put a little bit of sugar in, and then I put a little bit of flour. Billy Bob was like, oh no. Well, Calvin, how do I know that you're not a mirage? And Calvin spit in his eye. Billy Bob said, you didn't have to do that. That was rude. Calvin said, well, I didn't quite know how to convince you. So, Calvin said he would help them go home. So Billy Bob and Stanley and Porky all got on Calvin's back, and he took them to the edge of the desert. And there he set them down at a great river. And he said, well, Billy Bob, I must be back on my way to the desert. And Billy Bob said, thank you, Calvin. And Calvin said, please come again, Billy Bob, to see me. And I'll help you find this treasure, as long as you split it with me. Billy Bob said, do camels use gold? He said, no, not really, but, you know, the adventure. Billy Bob said, I guess everybody kind of likes that. So he and Porky and Stanley all went home. And let me tell you, Billy Bob was very tired after that. And so when he got home, he just collapsed straight into bed. What is that? Oh, it's a front door. Man, I should have like a fake front door. Like a mirage front door. And people knock, and then I'm not there. And I don't know, I'll just get the front door. But that, my friends, is another story. Well, I'll see you guys in the next episode of Legends with Elroy. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya.